What terrifying confession has someone told you while drunk? I heard my mom tell her friend I was a mistake and the reason her and my dad divorced. That's why you don't eavesdrop. After my mom died I was going through her email. We never had a good relationship. Pretty much ever. Anyways, I went in her mail and just did a search for my name. Found a part where she told my aunt how much she didn't like me and wishes I would just go away. It wasn't the least bit surprising. And I've said the same thing about her. But it still stung a bit. The thing we always fought about was her drinking. She was a chronic abusive alcoholic. I worked in a hospital and an alcoholic guy I knew from around my town came in. Of course he was very drunk, so he got a bed. He was homeless at this point. Just as he was starting to settle he screamed I slit his effing throat. So I went up to him and asked him to settle and he started telling me that he did it while in the army and could never forgive himself for it. Cried himself to sleep and died in the local park a few months later. Once at a college party, this big guy got upset, picked up the table and threw it across the room, shouting my uncle molested me. Everyone was terrified but we all felt really bad for the guy. Damn. Fingers crossed somebody there helped him into therapy. That statement'll stop a party dead in its tracks, and honestly for his sake it's good that it did. If my ex was still in love with me I wouldn't be married to you. A co-worker told me she went all angel of mercy and smothered her elderly, dementia-ridden grandmother while she was sleeping. The next Monday in the office was definitely a weird one after that particular happy hour confession. Haha, I put a dar all in your beer. We're gonna party till the sun comes up, bro. I have a friend whose grandmother married her late husband's friend. One day while drunk he confessed to killing her first husband. She packed up the kids and left. My sister's boyfriend at the time told me he thought he might have fallen for the wrong sister. Doesn't compare to most of these, but my sister is my best friend, and I was so scared he might ruin that. Edit. Since a lot of people have asked. No, I never told my sister about it. They broke up very shortly after this. Because he was untrustworthy in other ways he stole some money. She kicked him to the curb. At a family gathering my grandma got tipsy and started to tell stories from her childhood. While she does this every time, no matter tipsy or sober. Yes, it's just a normal grandma thing. This time it took a dark turn. She told us a story that is the reason she hates to go to the dentist and particularly hates the drilling part. She told us a story about when she was 6 years old. During WWII my family lived in Hamburg, Germany, right next to the harbor. During a particular week in 1943 the city was continuously bombed and over 35,000 people died and more than 100,000 people were injured. The houses that were hit mostly burned down, creating a huge fire with such force that it sucked not only oxygen in, creating strong winds, but also people. The fire created such heat that people running out of their burning houses got stuck in the molten asphalt on the streets and burned to death. As it was all happening around her, that particular smell was present for over a week in her part of the city. Drilling in your tooth creates exactly that smell. My grandma had to stop the dentist, as she recognized the smell immediately. This story shook us to the core, as it came out of the blue. It still sends chills down my spine. My story can't compare with yours in significance, and it has nothing to do with drinking. But, my mother always hated driving over a particular bridge. One that had a metal mesh as the roadbed. The sound the tires make is very particular. We used to tease her about it for years. One day she had enough, and told us why. When she was away in WWII, she went out to party with some sailors. One of them had a car with running boards, and one more sailor wanted to come along. One the other guys didn't like. They told him to ride on the running board and hang on. When they went over a bridge with a similar roadbed, they hit the gas, and the extra sailor fell off and was run over. She was still carrying the guilt 40 years later. Night before his wedding day. I'm still in love with C, but I'm still gonna marry F tomorrow because it's too late now. A friend of mine died from an OD. After the funeral a mutual friend of ours and I were getting drunk when he broke down crying. He asked me if I remembered the time when he and our dead friend told me about an accident that they'd witnessed where they saw a truck driver die. I told him I did. He then told me the most messed up He said that our friend ran up to the dying man and stole his wedding ring, and that the man couldn't do anything but look up, terrified, at our friend as he was being robbed. I knew they were bad into drugs, but I never thought they could do anything like that. I grew up with them. They were like my brothers. I don't really trust anyone completely anymore. A few years ago, my mom witnessed an accident. A lady was texting, blew through a red light, and T-boned a truck with an elderly man driving. My mom jumped out of her car and held onto him while waiting for an ambulance. The girl who hit him, early 20s, was freaking out and called her mom. The mom showed up first and kept telling my mom, just tell the cops he ran the red light. No one will know. And he died. My mom heard his last words. Sounds really, that she repeated for weeks. My mom cried for days. She met the family, and it was the man and his wife's anniversary, or something like that. We obviously told the cops the truth, but we don't know any of the follow-up. His obituary is framed on our wall. I hate to think the last thing he heard was just tell the cops this was his fault. Had a buddy tell me his friend drunkenly confessed to him that he had killed his stepdad and made it look like a suicide. His stepdad had been abusive towards him and his mom for years, and it finally broke when he made it look like his stepfather had hung himself in their garage. I don't know who the friend was. I was never given a name or much else of the story. One of my best friends since middle school opened up to me the day we had our last day of high school. We had been partying all day, got off at 10 AM. But most people left at around 3 PM to go get ready for the seniors dinner and after party and whatnot. My friend stayed behind with our class president. I told him I'd pick him up for the dinner and left. When I got back, both were falling down drunk and in tears. A few years earlier, our class priest had lost his father. I take my buddy back to his house so he can get changed for the dinner, and on the way he tells me what happened. They had kept drinking when everyone left and eventually got to the topic of their dads. I had never met my friend's dad. He died and that was all I knew. I never knew how he died. It turns out my buddy's dad was a lawyer or something in the country he's from and was being extorted by a gang. When money started to run out, my buddy's dad sent the family to another country and told them he'd meet them there, that he had to finish some things up. A few weeks after moving they learned that he had been murdered by the gang. It completely messed my friend up. We always used to drink heavily and whatever since we were in high school. For me it was just drinking. For my buddy it was numbing the pain. It was effing shocking when he told me this, and really made me understand him a lot more. Why he acted how he acted. It was me who did the confessing. When I was 18 I was assaulted on a bridge in the middle of the night when I was all alone. My mum works in hearing, and she had always told me to bite someone if I got into trouble. So I did. I bit into his neck until my teeth met again. He fell down, then I ran all the way home. A few weeks later I read in the news that a serial assaulter had gone to the hospital with neck wounds and later died. They'd drawn it down to him attacking someone and them acting in self-defense. I never told anyone until I got really drunk with my boyfriend last year and spilled it. He couldn't believe I'd kept that secret. Absolutely self-defense on your part, and that guy never assaulted anyone else again. My mother's first husband, the sperm donor. I was 16. She had just walked out that same day and he got extremely drunk and told me that I was never supposed to have been born and that I should have died with my brother. I asked him what he meant by my brother since I had no siblings, and he confessed to beating the hell out of my mother when she was pregnant and she ended up in the hospital. I was born but my twin brother didn't make it. At the time my mother's English, she's Polish, was not good. So he claimed to doctors that she just fell down the stairs and threatened to have her deported and used me as blackmail if she ever told anyone. I followed her soon after once she had contacted me that she'd found a place to stay. I asked her if she had anything to tell me regarding my birth and she told me the same story. I guess that explains why I felt like I was missing a part of myself all my life. A co-worker was pretty inebriated when he told me that he hates his life. He hates his partner, and the only reason he's still married to her is because he loves his daughter and doesn't want to lose her. Me, not drunk, but high as a kite. When I was in Peace Corps, I told my best friend that I loved him and then kissed him. I then realized what I did, and feared for my friendship with him. He told me, "I've known you were gay for over a year, and I've seen you glancing at me. It's okay, but I'm straight." To add to this, we were both just wearing boxer shorts, as it was hot as F in Khoi Karan, Thailand at the time. My mom was in another state for business. A company flew her crew out to Texas to discuss a change in software and offered their company, and so it was just my dad taking care of me. I was about 10 and he came to tuck me in one night, but he has incredibly hammered. He opened the door to my bedroom, told me I was a mistake that saved them from getting divorced and good night. Worst part is he didn't close the door completely when he left. Last part, he'd close to home. Have some respect. Shut the goddamn door, Jesus Christ. I had a boyfriend who never talked about his past ever. He talked so fondly of his old state but just about the actual state, never about people. If you treat a prod further he would just say, oh well, it doesn't matter anymore. We were young. I was about 19 and he was probably like 23 or so. He drank a ton all the time and whatever, we were young, so I just thought that it was normal and all in good fun. One night while sh-faced he started talking about how much he loved going into the woods and how he and his friends enjoyed playing on the rivers and streams in his old state. Then he got very sad and started to babble a bit incoherently. I heard him say something along the lines of his friend came to his house on drugs, then more incoherently babbled, then something about his friend getting shot, then more incoherent babbling, then something about that is why he can never go home again. He was so desperately sad and missed his home very much. You could tell every time the topic came up. So yeah, I am pretty sure he accidentally, or on purpose, killed a guy and was on the run. I have my money on accident because he seemed so distraught, but you never know. Also, you barely know anyone or anything at 19 years old. I often wonder if he ever had to face those demons. Shared an off-campus apartment with a very cool older guy in college. He was a nurse. Got up super early every morning to do his shifts. Every night you could find him at his regular Irish pub. They let me drink there without ID because they knew I was with him. Basically a super high functioning alcoholic. One day I came home after finishing my exams. He brings out a bottle of Jameson to celebrate. It was about to stroke 3 full. After a few shots he starts telling me about his time in Vietnam. I'd known him for 2 years and he had never brought it up. And I had never asked. I knew he was a vet, but assumed he had been a nurse. Nope. Special forces. I'm not military and I'm sure I got some of the actual military stuff wrong, as you shall come to understand. His demeanor totally changed after a few drinks. He started telling me about having to go on covert operations to carry out assassinations of civilians. Said he dreams of the faces of all the people he killed. We ended up polishing off the entire bottle. He got up the next morning at 5 AM and went off to work. I spent the entire day moaning in bed and praying to the porcelain god. We never spoke about it again. My friend's husband told me he was hiding liquor from his wife, my friend, which was weird, because they both drink and it's not a big deal. I told my friend what he said. She confronted him and all of his lies started pouring out. Cheating on her with multiple women, lying about his income, taking CCs out in her name, racking up tens of thousands of dollars on them, stealing from their kids' college funds. They are now divorced. That weird little lie he told me while drunk is what started it all. That they witnessed a mugging stabbing outside of a bar, and did nothing but watch the person bleed on the sidewalk. I asked why they didn't call 911 and the excuse was that they knew the stabber and didn't want to snitch. Also possible to just freeze up out of shock. The first shooting I witnessed, I drove a half hour back to my apartment, sat down, and stared at a wall for God knows how long before thinking to call the police. By then who knows what the F had happened. The second, yet more than one, I just pulled into a parking lot a block over and made the call. This will most likely get lost but here it goes. When I moved to the current city I live in I found a roommate on Craigslist. It was 2011, so not as weird as it would be today, and he was really cool. He lived in a double master house so I had a lot of privacy. He was a young real estate agent, and we ended up hanging out in each other's social circles. Well, we'll call him M. Ended up catching feelings for this girl that became pretty close to me. When the feelings weren't reciprocated he started getting weird and almost resentful towards me, but I digress. Over time I found out that M had a drinking problem. I would get home from work around 1 AM and it wasn't uncommon he would be passed out on the couch after finishing off one of those cheap A-liter bottles of wine. One night I get home a little early and I notice him sitting with his back against the couch in the total dark. I ask him if he's okay, in which I can immediately tell he's emotionally distressed. With the drunk wine next to him, He begins telling me that when he first moved to the city he caught his girlfriend in bed with another guy and shot and killed him. His girlfriend fled the state, and because it was in a shifty part of town police never paid it much attention, so he got away with it and he thinks about it all the time. I gracefully made my exit upstairs freaking TF out. When I saw him the next morning he asked me what time I got home from work because he didn't hear me come in, meaning he has no recollection of telling me he murdered someone. I had my dad help move me out the next week and I never mentioned it to him. I overheard a murder confession. I was at a resort in New England with my family. I went onto the balcony to smoke. I could hear people talking somewhere above and to my right. They were very drunk. The man said he was going crazy with guilt. He shot someone over a drug deal and he drives by the memorial all the time. I couldn't tell which unit the people were in. The man had no discernible accent. He never mentioned a city name or anything. No details at all. I really wish I could have helped solve a murder.